This is a homage beat.
Stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. Whoever what believes in him shall not be put to shame. This verse is extremely powerful because it demonstrates how one can be what saved from God's wrath. The verse mentions Zion. Zion is a city, is known as the city of David. It was the easternmost of the two hills of Jerusalem and was established by King David in his royal capital. In fact, Zion was what? A fortress. But it is used as an analogy to describe one who will be a deliverer. I say the person that is the rock, the stone laid out in Zion is what? Jesus. Jesus is the rock. He is the stone. This is the description of deity. Like I was saying before, protection is ultimately an attribute of God. Ultimately, an attribute of God, and that He alone is the one who truly protects. But Jesus is deity as well,
Right.
and so He protects. So what is Jesus protecting us from? Not just from another human being. He's protecting us from what? The wrath of God. It says what? Like you were just saying, whoever what? Believes in him shall not be put to shame. If Jesus is truly deity, then the same attributes applied to God in the Old Testament applied to him. The psalmist says, He alone is my rock. What? My salvation, my fortress. I shall not be greatly shaken. This clearly describes Jesus and how what? He too is the rock of our salvation. If Jesus is truly the rock and the fortress, what is he protecting us from? Surely he protects us from earthly things, but more importantly, he protects us from the wrath to come. Many mistakenly think Jesus saves us from the devil, when in fact Jesus saves us from God's wrath. Those who take refuge in Jesus are what? Protected. Those who take refuge in Jesus are delivered from God the Father's wrath, because what God the Son bore it for them. And I end with this verse. It's Romans 5:9 through 11. I say, since therefore we have been justified by his blood, much more shall we be saved by him from what? The wrath of God. That's what we're being saved from, right. The wrath of God. For while we were enemies, we were reconciled by God by the death of his Son. Much more now that we are reconciled shall we be saved by his life. So here again we see this picture that we were enemies of God, that we were worthy of his wrath. But it says through his blood we are justified and saved from God through Jesus, from what? The wrath of God. So again, starting off, what are the benefits of a rock? Something so simple, you're like, what are you talking about? And I make that connection all the way back to the cross, and that our greatest enemy is God, and that we are enemies of God, and that God's wrath abides upon us, and there's nothing that we can look to on earth that can protect us from that wrath. But there is one. There's what? One who is Zion. It's like, it's crazy how it uses that illustration of Zion, that in reference to Jesus, that he is the true fortress that can ultimately protect us. And what does he ultimately protect us from? He protects us from the wrath of God. Therefore, we can truly say that God is my rock. He is my salvation. He is my fortress, because he has protected me in the ultimate sense of the word. So that's what we had, man. Hopefully, next time you see a rock,
right, you give it a little bit more thought.
Yeah, give it a little bit more thought in regards to it. And like I said, just trying to make sure I'm staying faithful to Scripture, because we hear it all the time in the songs and stuff like that, where we talk about God being our rock, but we never really think of the implications of what that actually means. So hopefully I always count it a victory if I can just get someone to think. If someone can just think about these things, you don't have to agree with me, but just think on it. Like I said, if you deny God, you're trusting in creation. We just finished saying that's not a guarantee.
Right.
Your greatest enemy isn't a human being, and the worst thing that can happen to you isn't death. Your enemy is God, and the worst thing that can happen to you is for him to pour out his wrath on you. That's the greatest threat.
Yeah.
God has delivered. Therefore, God is true in saying that he is the ultimate provider and protector, that he is the fortress. I didn't know if you had any additional thoughts, any questions that you had.
Man, I just want to thank you. I did want to ask you. I probably should have asked this at the beginning, but what kind of research, I guess, did you do when you were thinking, like, what are the benefits of a rock and the usefulness of a rock? Because, like you said, like we talked about earlier, no one really thinks about
exactly.
rock.
So it was crazy. So again, when I started this, I was just simply like, how can I have conversations with family and friends about what I believe? Because you tell somebody I forget who was, I feel like it was Gabe at church. He was saying, you tell somebody you're a Christian and everybody's a Christian, especially down here in the South. You know, everybody's a Christian. So it's like, what sets me apart?
Right.
Where you just say a Christian, you have this connotation where I don't really care about what this person has to say. This overly religious person was like, that wasn't me. Right. I always hate the term when people say they found God. Like, I wasn't looking. Right. I didn't find him. But I heard the gospel. It changed my life, and it's like I have no choice but to share it with other people. Right. But how do I do it in a way where it respects that person, but me not compromise on the truth? And I think I started with something as simple because it was around the time where Black Lives Matter was going on, and essentially the undercurrent of that is worth and value, that humans, whether you're black, white, whatever color you are, you have worth and value. But we never take it a step further and ask why, you know? And so I started writing that, and then it's kind of funny because the second one that I wrote was not truth, because that's the second one in order. The second one I wrote was like about your heart. Right. And so I just kept writing and just, I don't know where the topics came from. Right. I'm not like some mystical person or anything like that. Like God would literally just give me the idea, right, and I would just run with it. And so after a while, I noticed a pattern. I noticed there were like abstract concepts where we're talking about truth, love, fear, so things that were intangible, and then things that were tangible, like your heart, a statue, rocks, right, tangible things. So I'm making the argument for God using just things that we can naturally understand, a known concept. Right. And that's the other thing. What the heck is a known concept? Right. A rock. Right. You know what it means. I don't have to unpack that too much. You know what a rock is. Right. Now the question is, how can I make an eternal truth from that? And so I would just think of things. And so I was familiar enough with scripture where I could pick up on certain things. Like, I don't know, I just thought of rock. And like I said, I heard or read verses where it talked about God being a rock, God being our fortress. And so because I knew where I wanted to end, I knew I had to start with just giving just that basic introduction, because like for people, even though I know they view the topic and they may be like, I don't care about it, but hopefully it'll pique their interest, right, especially if they know, okay, hopefully I do a good job explaining that my point is to draw a spiritual parallel, a gospel parallel. So hopefully you're interested to see how is he going to do that? Right. How are you going to draw that spiritual parallel? And so I just would have ideas and, again, make sure they're grounded in scripture, that I'm not just coming out of the blue, but scripture talks about God being a rock. And then you see throughout history, fortified cities, you see these motifs, because like I said, I didn't even know what Zion was. Right. So I had to research, and I'm like, oh crap, this is a fortified city, and it's comparing it to Jesus, and you see how it relates to each other. And I'm like, man, you just see how scripture, it can't possibly be just the work of men, that it's the work of God. Right. And just how it does all of these things so that it can present a truth, and does it in a way, because I think people who don't believe in God acknowledge that he was a good teacher, right, at the very least. And one of the ways that we know Jesus was a good teacher, because he know how to communicate to his audience, right, you know, because we talk about Bible scholars. There was no more Bible scholar than Jesus, right, you know, but he knew how to articulate himself just to everybody so that they could understand him, right. And how he would do that was using these analogies. Because I'm the bread of life. You can understand. I'm the door. I'm the gate. I'm the good shepherd. Right. He would talk to people in terms that they could understand. Right. Use known concepts to reveal eternal truth. And so that's pretty much all I was doing. And so I don't remember, because certain things, like I remember for math, I was just thinking about it one day while I was in the shower. I just thought about it. And I started writing on it. I don't remember how I came up with rock, but I was just thinking of tangible things. Right. What can I use that's tangible that can point back to the gospel, and not just something random? Right. You know, something that actually can make a direct correlation back to scripture. So that's how I came up with the topic. So the first 20 chapters are abstract. The second half are concrete. So if you notice, that's the pattern for the second half of the book, that I'm just trying to use something because that's the argument. I can't believe in God because I can't see him. Right. I'm giving you concrete things that will point back to God. Right. So that's how I came up with that one. So yeah, I know. Did you have it? I love questions like that too, because I'm always like interested in someone's thought process. Like I would say, like, one of my favorite shows, and again, it just shows just how depraved I am. I liked Hannibal, and I like the movie, but there was a TV show that came on, I think it was like NBC or something, and it was like the bad guy from like the James Bond Casino Royale, and he played Hannibal, and I just love the cinematography. I love the storyline. I loved all of that, and just I think what I was gonna say was the guy who was the what was his name? I can't remember the guy's name. He was an FBI profiler, essentially, because he was a profiler for the FBI so that he could catch serial killers.
Right.
So if I know the mind of a serial killer, it'd make it easier to find them.
Right.
And not that I want to know the mind of a serial killer, but I like that idea of a profiler,
right.
even though that word has such a bad connotation. But I like knowing how people think. Right. So when people ask me what was my thought process, I like questions like that, just because I just like how people think. So yeah,
that's good. Yeah, I can say that every topic that I read in this book, it all points back to scripture, and I think that's good. That's what, it helps, and it shows that you're not just writing and just running off on a tangent or something like that. Just like, I actually have meaning with this. So yeah, I just want to say that I really appreciate the book. I appreciate you having me up here as well.
No, I really, like I said, I could not have imagined, because I did the first 20. And I'm like, what am I going to do to finish the book? And so, and I didn't want to just keep asking the same people, because I know how time consuming it is, but God provided, you know, he provided a way, because we're almost done. Like I said, I got another special guest lined up next week. God willing, everything comes through with that. But I think we literally only maybe had like 5 concepts left, you know, to complete. So I would have never thought I would have been able to get through 40 chapters of a concept and do a podcast with it.
Right.
Like, I never would have thought of that. So I thank you for being here, and just, like I said, I always say just co-laboring with the gospel, because it's all of our missions to communicate the gospel.
Right.
And so you being here with me is just it's a huge blessing, and I appreciate it a lot. But if you didn't have anything else, would you do me the honor and close us out in prayer?
Sure thing, man.